Now we're going to talk about the lateral area and surface area of cylinders. So you'll find this is very similar to the prisms that we've been talking about. They hold a lot of the same properties, except the only thing that's specifically different about this is that in a cylinder, our bases are both circles. Circles are not polygons, so that's why they have their own category. So here, like we had with our prisms, we have a right cylinder where it is straight up and down, so that axis or altitude that connects the bases is the height, and that is forming a right angle. Here we have an oblique cylinder where we have the axis is still in the middle, so that's that distance between those two bases, but we have this altitude on the outside. So all it means again is that it's slanted slightly. Bases are still parallel and congruent to each other. So the formulas for lateral area and surface area for a cylinder are very, very similar to what we saw with the prisms. Now, it looks a lot more complicated because we're dealing with circles. So let's just take a second and remember our formulas that we have talked about with circles. So we've talked about the circumference, which is 2 pi times the radius. And we've also talked about the area of a circle as pi r squared. So for the lateral area, we have 2 pi times the radius times the height. Now, if you think about it, this 2 pi r right here is the same as the circumference formula, right? And then we're just multiplying it by the height, the distance between the two bases. Now, if you think back when we talked about a prism, the lateral area was the perimeter of the base times the height. So you'll see with the cylinders, it's the exact same thing. We're just more specific because with a cylinder, we have circular bases. So we can plug in that 2 pi r for the circumference, not perimeter, but circumference in this case. For our surface area, we have our 2 pi r times h, right? So our lateral area, plus 2 pi r squared. And again, this pi r squared is the same as our area formula. Now with our prisms, we had perimeter times the height plus 2 times the area of the base. Well, if you think about it, these are really the same formula because the pi r squared is our area of a circle. Now, with the prisms, this just leaves room for us to have any kind of polygon as a base. Here with a cylinder, again, we know it's only going to be a circle, so that's why we can specify this. So here are our two formulas. And again, if you have the surface area formula, you have the lateral area in that first part. And then if you find the surface area, you really have both answers. All right, so let's find the lateral and surface area of the cylinder. So the pieces that we need here are the radius and the height. Now be careful when you see the radius or diameter drawn in, you want to make sure you're only looking at the radius. Here we only see that halfway line drawn in, so we do know we are talking about the radius, so that is 14. The height is the distance between the bases, and that's 18. All right, so I'm going to start with my surface area formula, and that's going to be 2 pi times the radius, which is 14, times the height, which is 18, plus, and then the second part is, here, I'm going to write this up here for you guys. All right, sorry, I usually do that sooner. And so plus 2 pi times our radius squared, so 14 squared. And remember, we're just squaring the 14. All right, so I'm going to start simplifying this. And I know we've talked about exact answers versus rounded answers. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep my answers with the pi in it until the very end. So I multiplied the 2 times 14 times 18, and that gave me 504 pi. So again, I just carried down that pi. Plus 14 squared, which is 196, times 2 will give me 392 pi. All right, so now I see that my surface area, I can combine these two numbers. So 504 plus 392 will give me 896 pi. So to get my surface area, I'm going to multiply that through. So I'll do 896 times pi, and that'll give me roughly 2,814.9. So there's my surface area. And now for my lateral area, we have this 504 pi. So we just need to multiply that out. So our lateral area will end up being 504 times pi, which will give us about 1,583.4. All right, so we have our lateral area and our surface area. All right, so again, all I needed here was the radius and the height. I plugged that into my formula for surface area, and then I used my exact answers as I was working. So I did all the multiplication, left the pi with it. At this point, I combined like terms, so I added the 504 and the 392 to get the 896, and I carried the pi along with me. And then to get my final answer for surface area, I multiplied that through to get the 2,814.9. To get my lateral area, again, I took my 504 pi because this first part is our lateral area. All right, and I just multiplied 504 times pi. Now keep in mind, if you're using the pi button versus 3.14, your answers may be slightly different, so that's why it's important to show your work. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It's just in the way that things get rounded, and especially if you multiply earlier on by pi or 3.14, it will throw the final answers off from each other. So just make sure you're showing your work. All right, so now I'm going to go through a few more examples, finding your lateral and surface area. So again, I'm going to start with the surface area for each of these, and then we're going to just move on from there to find the lateral area. So we have 2 pi times the radius times the height plus 2 pi r squared. All right. So key pieces of information here. We want the radius and the height. So in this first example here, number 19, our radius is 3 and our height is 15. So again, remember the height is the distance between the two bases. So I'm going to plug this in. And it's really important that you're labeling surface area versus lateral area when you're writing your formulas out. It's going to be very helpful for all of us. So 2 pi times 3 times the height, which is 15, plus 2 pi 3 squared. All right, so I'm going to multiply this through. So I'm going to get 90 pi plus 3 squared is 9 times 2 is 18 pi. All right, so I'm going to combine my like terms here. So I get 108 pi. So this would be my exact answer for surface area, but I am now going to multiply that out. So I'm going to do 108 times pi, and that's going to give me 339.3. Now to get my lateral area, I am going to take that 90 pi and multiply that out. So I'm going to do 90 times pi, and that will give me about 282.7. All right, so those are my two answers for the first problem. Alrighty, so let's look at this next one. So again, key pieces of information: radius is 7, the height is 16. All right, so we have our surface area, 2 pi times the radius of 7 times the height of 16 plus 2 times pi times the radius, or 7 squared. All right, so I'm going to do 2 times 7 times 16, so that's going to give me 224 pi, plus 7 squared is 49 times 2 will give me 98 pi. So for surface area, my exact answer is going to be 322 pi. All right, and I can multiply that out to get 1011.6. All right, so again, that's my surface area. Now my lateral area, I already am pretty much at my answer. So I take this first part, so the 224 pi, and I'm going to multiply that out. So 224 times pi will give me 703.7. And that's my lateral area. All right, this last one is a little different because we do have the whole diameter drawn in. So when you see something like that and you have a number there or a line pointing with a number, that means that the whole thing is 8. So our diameter is 8, which means that our radius is 4. All right, so we cut that diameter in half. So our radius here is 4, and our height is 6.2. All right, so let's take a look here. So our surface area is 2 pi times our radius times our height plus 2 pi times our radius squared. All right, so I'm first going to take that 2 times 4 times 6.2, and that'll give me 49.6 pi. Plus 4 squared is 16 times 2 is 32 pi. All right, so now I'm going to combine these together, and I'm going to get 81.6 pi, and I'm going to multiply that through to get 256.3 for my surface area. All right, and then my lateral area, again, I'm just going to take this first part here. So I have 49.6 pi, and I'm going to multiply that through. So 49.6 times pi is 155.8. All right, so there are my lateral and surface areas for my cylinders.